Dr. Mort, thank you for helping put this together. When I spoke to Dr. Mort when we were speaking, he said, "You don't have to call me doctor." I said, "What do you mean? You're a doctor?" He said, "No, I'm a doctor in chemistry." I said, "That's great. I used to be a big consumer of chemicals, so we'll get along good." Then I found out his last name was Bar, and I'm like, home run. I don't know what time this bar opens or closes. Dr. Friedman, it's great to see you. Keep rocking the sphere beard. Really beautiful. He's machmer all year round, We're going to sing a niggin in a minute. I didn't know it was the Rav's niggin, Hashiyat Amecha. I actually knew there was this sort of corny joke when I was in yeshiva, which was because, the pasuk Hashiyat Amecha has 10 words. So when you want to count for a minyan, you count Hashiyat Es Amecha Uvarech Es Nachlazecha, and you get to 10, because, it's you're not supposed to count. And it's one of them, as if the Taryag mitzvahs weren't enough to try to keep. There's all these mystical things also that we don't count. Ayin Hara, Ayin Tov. But they said Chabadskers, they need 13 for a minyan. Why? Hashiyat Amecha was like Urei, Murei, Mureim. So you need 13 for Lubavitcher. Bekitzer, I didn't realize that this was Rav Twersky's niggin. I thought it was a Chabad niggin, like a lot of people. And then I realized that they'd been stiffing Rabbi Twersky for years on his royalties, and they were giving out dollars every Sunday instead of Rabbi Twersky's money. So I'm here. Bekitzer, this is my dear friend Shlomi. He's going to accompany me on guitar. We'll get into the story soon, but Shlomi's also my sponsor. He doesn't... Hoshia et amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia es amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia es amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia es amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, ueim, ueim Ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia es amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia et amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia et amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam Hoshia et amecha Uvarech et nachlatecha Ueim, 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 ueim Venasim, ueim Venasim ad haolam. I could see why they brought, you guys look like a crowd that's about to go off the wagon. I could see why they need to be mechazek, you guys. A lot of party animals in this room. Lamash, a lot of party animals. I'm actually glad the Rav told me before I came in. He said there's going to be a couple of people that walk out when you start singing. The people in the velas don't get, don't take it personally. And I'm glad he said that, because I usually take things personally. So I'm very glad he said that, which actually brings me to, I don't know why they picked me to come here. I'm just happy. Dr. Friedman, usually I pay him thousands of shekel an hour to hear my life story, my troubles every week. And he's like, listen, I'll make you a deal. I won't charge you, but there'll be another bunch of people in the room and hundreds watching worldwide. I said, listen, there's a Pintele Yid in me that says if I'm getting it for free, I'm coming. All right, Clearly, you guys all have drug problems, which is why I'm here. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of my life story. Some of it, a lot of it will probably be boring. I don't know why you want to hear it. I have to live with it. Why anyone else would want to hear what I have to live with is still a mystery to me. I was born in Toronto in 1981. Toronto is a city in Canada. It's known for its coldness. He's looking at me, he's like, where's Toronto? It's a place. It's a place. A very tough crowd. I was the oldest of 11 siblings. I was born into a frum family. My parents are Bali Tshuva. Hi, Mom, if you're watching. Hi, Dad. And my father worked really hard his whole life, really worked hard. He woke up at 2 o'clock every morning. He went down to the fruit terminal, and he would buy fruits and vegetables, and he would sell it off a truck. And I really learned what hard work was from my father. But malasot, we lived in like the suburbs of like, you know, a nice, wealthy community. And my father, we were Bali Tshuva through, my parents were Bali Tshuva through Lubavitch, but we're actually originally Sephardic, which means we basically don't know which minhagim to keep and not to keep. Like, I wake up on Pesach, like, till chatzos I eat kitnius, and I don't eat kitnius, and I make a half a Sudas Mashiach with grape juice. It's confusing. And I always felt like I was less than everyone else around me. I struggled with my weight, even as a kid. We didn't have a lot of money, not because my parents didn't work hard. They worked really hard. They worked harder than most of the other people. But everyone else, this guy's father's a lawyer, that guy's father owns this development, that development. And we were kids who were just, you know, we were getting Tomchei Shabbos. There were people delivering groceries there. My father was delivering fruits and vegetables to all the wealthy families, and we were getting, you know, some of these packages of chicken, you know, frozen chicken from the local chesed organization. And it didn't feel fair. It didn't feel equal. And I felt like I was less than everyone. And my parents' mamish did the best, and I say this belief shalom, the mamish did their best, but their best wasn't enough to make me, as a child, feel like I was equal. And we'd get coupons from the local Jewish organizations to go to the secondhand clothing stores and pick out secondhand clothing. And being the awkwardly shaped child that I was, nothing ever fit exactly right. So, and kids could be cruel, and kids could be mean. And where do you find comfort when you don't feel good? Chocolate. No? But growing up, I told myself that one day I'm going to show the world, and I'm going to show them all I'm as good as everyone else. I'm better than everyone else. They just don't know yet. I'm going to show them. I didn't know how, but I knew I wanted what everybody else had. People would show up to school with new, crisp Nike, you know, Nike running shoes, and they'd go to these fancy vacations, and they'd fly to Florida to pay, you know, for Pesach, and they'd go here for Hanukkah and Disneyland, and I didn't have that. And after having me, my parents decided to have 10 more kids, because that's what the Rabbanei Shalom wanted, evidently. Some of them are here. Some of my siblings are actually here. One of them, we're not actually sure she's one of my siblings. That's another story. We were actually... I'm just going to digress for a second. Sorry. You know how they say, Ein mukdam u'me'uchar b'Torah? You know, so we're just going to make like little side points. We were like a bunch of kids born one after the other, and you know, there was like a certain consistency. And I guess considering that both my parents are brunettes, we were all brunettes. And one day my lovely blonde sister showed up like out of nowhere, like the local delivery, and there's a blonde child. And my parents were really unsure as to whether or not there was a mix-up in the hospital, like for years. Now, there was actually a way, to clear that up. Like there was a test, but it cost a couple $100 or something, and they figured they'd rather live with the mystery than, yeah, just to keep things exciting. Anyways. We were 11 children. A lot of us struggled with my weight. I struggled with my weight. And my first real attempt at making something out of myself was in learning. We went to like really from schools, and we went from, you know, I went from Cheder Chabad to the local Chazak Litvish yeshiva, and Hashem blessed me with a good brain. A brain that I damaged over the years, but at the time it was pretty fresh, crisp, and it was able to process things. And I had a very Talmudic Gemara cup, as I would say. And I went to this yeshiva in Toronto, and from there I went to another yeshiva in upstate New York. And I was doing amazing. I was fanatical about learning. I was learning. I wanted to be the first one in the base medrash and the last one out. And I was learning L'Shem Shamayim. Like, I really wanted to learn, but I also wanted to be the best. And both those things were true at the same time. So, and that worked really well until I got homesick and reached adulthood. And then there's like these little trips on the weekend to Manhattan and to here. Then I'd come back to yeshiva and guilt. Can't believe I did this. I can't believe I went and I did this and I went to this bar. And especially being in a very firm yeshiva, and there was no one to speak to about these things. I remember once walking in the yeshiva that I was in, which was considered one of the Harvards of yeshivas, Dr. Friedman. One of the Harvards of yeshivas. And I remember I went up to one of the rabbanim there, and I just asked them like a basic Emunah question, something like simple, like how do I know the Torah is true, something like that. And they looked at me like I just killed Yoshka. I didn't actually kill Yoshka. She looks don't be upset. Please don't be upset. It wasn't me. I swear, it really wasn't me. It mamish wasn't me. And I was in this constant tug of war between sitting and harving over a Blat Gemara and trying to get the images of the off Shabbos out of my head. And eventually the images of the off Shabbos, they won that tug of war. It's very hard to compete. There were no healthy outlets. There was no healthy there was nothing. Everything that I learned, and I'm in a shul, so I'm going to try to keep my language as clean as possible. Everything that I learned about male and female relationships was from bad sources. It was never from a healthy source. It was never from a Rebbe sitting down and learning with me. It was never from parents having, again, my parents may have had a conversation, but that wasn't the basis. As a matter of fact, when we were growing up in yeshiva and stuff, they'd have that stuff crossed out. When we'd get that part of the Gemara or Rashi where all of a sudden there was something that would, all of a sudden, like half the sleeping Bachram would perk up and like became a bunch of Chaim Kanievsky sprouted up in 3 seconds to hear what's going on. Why are you laughing? I should mention that over the years I was also a hustler in terms of working. Like when I was younger, I'd shovel driveways, I sold candy. I did stuff of that sort because I wanted money and I didn't have money. And everyone else around me seemed to have money. I found out later that half the people that I thought were rich weren't so rich. Half the people that I thought were successful weren't so successful. All those fancy houses with the white picket fences and the family vacations, a lot of them were really miserable. My life maybe wasn't so bad after all, but at the time I thought that I had it the worst. Honestly, I'm not going to bring up the Holocaust because I'm just not going to. But in my mind, and my wife's shaking her head, don't do it. But my wife has chronic neck pain from shaking her head like this to me. You don't seem amused by anything I'm saying. I'm sorry. I want to make amends. We'll speak afterwards. I wasn't a bad teenager. I didn't do drugs as a teenager. I didn't drink much at all. I drank on Purim when me and the other Gishmaka Bachram went out collecting money. That was the once a year I drank. I remember I started smoking in yeshiva cigarettes because it was cool. And there wasn't much else to do. We learned Torah. There was a canteen or something, you could buy stuff in. And in between, the different seders, you could smoke cigarettes, and that made you a real outlaw. And I didn't even inhale with the cigarettes. I just smoked to be cool. I wanted to fit in. I wanted the other guys to look at me and just say, well, he's one of us. I wanted to fit in. I remember one day sorry? Real cigarettes. Real cigarettes. But I didn't inhale it. And I remember one day, real ones. And I remember one day this guy came up to me and he made fun of me. He goes, "You're not even inhaling." So what did I do? I started inhaling. I said, "Of course I'm inhaling." And I took a big drag of the cigarette and I inhaled. And from that moment forward, I was inhaling. We'll get to that afterwards, but you know, I spent the next 20 years or so smoking 2 to 4 packs of cigarettes a day. You never know how one little thing, that doesn't mean I wouldn't have smoked otherwise, but I remember the name of the guy, and I started inhaling from that point. Yeshiva didn't work out. Eventually, I couldn't sit and learn, so I figured I'm gonna go make money. And I started my first business, my first real business that didn't involve, you know, making my siblings go out and help me shovel driveways. My father told me he heard of a guy that a guy that died, who used to wash windows. And after he died, they found out he was a multimillionaire from washing windows. Ma leave washing windows. Is everyone okay? Okay. My story is sad, but it's okay. So my father took me. He bought me a bucket and a squeegee, and I started knocking on my neighbors' doors. Those poor neighbors. Every 3 minutes, I'm showing up at the door. You want to buy candy? You want to do this? You want me to shovel your driveway? Now I'm there to wash their windows. I started washing windows, and then very quickly, someone said, "Yeah, but also the top floor." And then I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm kind of scared of heights." So I took in a partner, and we started this company called K&S Window Washing. K for me, Kalfa, S for Stein, K&S Window Washing. And relatively speaking, for the 15, 16-year-olds we were at the time, we built it in. I got slave labor from some of my sisters. I had 6 sisters, sorry, 5 sisters. It's confusing. 6? She's saying 6. I'm sorry, we're 11 siblings. There's 6. I'm trying to focus on the good. I saw a thumb. I'm like, thumbs up, we're doing great. And my wife's like, no. We started a window washing business. We had telemarketers, had a couple of crews on the road. It was its whole experience. And eventually, at the age of 16, I realized that me and my partner, we had different levels of ambition. So he bought me out. I had my first exit. I was 16 years old, and I had $8,000 in my pocket from the sale of my window washing company. And I felt successful for a 16-year-old. And then I went on, I worked at an advertising company, and then one night on a perm night, I was driving around Thornhill. That's a place in Toronto. And I was driving around, and we saw a car full of Bisiako girls, and we did whatever smart, drunk people do. Long story short, I met this girl. We fell in love. She was a frum girl. And at the age of 17, we decided to get married, like all sensible 17-year-olds do. So we got married. My parents came down to the courthouse. They had to sign documents because I was still a minor by law. Got married. We moved into our own place. And at that point, I had already stepped into casino, a charity casino. They called it a charity casino because casinos weren't legal in Toronto proper at the time. I stepped into a charity casino. There was nothing charitable about them, other than the fact that you're giving your money, like tzedakah. But and I remember the feeling of walking into casino. I think it was with $20, and walking out with like $120, and that feeling of like, wow, this is incredible. I felt like, what's the story with the jugs of oil, where like the oil just keeps coming? Rabbi, who is the woman? Okay. It wasn't a test, I'm curious. And I had that amazing feeling of just like, the kids are for our honeymoon, we decided to go to Niagara Falls. And we went to Niagara Falls. I had whatever money I had from my illustrious business career, plus all our wedding presents, which didn't amount to much. So we had a few $1,000s, and I went there, and I said, I'm gonna go to the casino. I get to the front, to the security guy at the casino, and the guy goes, can I see your ID, please? So I confidently pulled out my fake ID, which showed that I was like, I don't know, a 25-year-old or whatever it was. And he goes, sir, we need like a government-issued driver's license. And I said, look, my wife's next to me. And he's like, yeah, but we don't really know that she's your wife. So I started explaining to him all the halachas of sheitel and peah. I'm like, look, she's covering her hair. She has a ring. The kitchen, they let us into the casino. It took me maybe an hour to lose all my money. Maybe an hour, maybe. And of course, some security guy flagged my wife, and they took us down. You know, you see in the movies, floors beneath the casino, like these little cement rooms. I was in one of those rooms. And they asked me for my fake ID again, and I showed it to him. And they're like, yeah, sir, you're not 25 years old, and you're banned from our casino. So they escorted us out of the premises. And that's how I started my marriage as a 17-year-old with no money. It was also the first day of my honeymoon. So now I had to figure out how we're going to enjoy. Good times. Turns out I wasn't such a good husband at the age of 17. We had a pretty rocky marriage for about 4 years. Until she decided, no kids. Thank you for your concern. Baruch Hashem, no kids. Thank God for those kids. They would have had a rough time. No kids. At the age of 21, she decided she had enough of me. I don't blame her. And that started a real spiral in my life. See, at the same time while I was having this miserable marriage for 4 years, I found something that would help me take the edge off at night. It was called marijuana. And it wasn't like a drug, like an actual drug. Marijuana, it's a plant. It's a plant that some people, okay. You look very unimpressed with me. I'll give you back my speaking fee, I promise. So occasionally I'd smoke. I worked really hard. Me and my brother started a business. We would work hard. We were working really, really hard at building our business. We were ambitious. We'd work all day. I wasn't playing around. I wasn't a stoner. I wasn't like those other guys that would just sit around. As a matter of fact, I prided myself on being the first one from my class that got married, clearly. I was also the first one from my class that bought a house. Like before I got divorced from my first wife. Yes, there's a number of them. Before I got divorced from my first wife, I bought a house at the age of, I think, 19 or something, and I felt so proud. I'm like, I'm such a success story. Like, I just wanted to run it. Like, if I lived in America, I would have called it an American success story, but I lived in Toronto, so it was a Torontonian success. And we started building this business, and it was mamash matzliach. And I'll never forget the month where my wife, my ex-wife, asked me for a divorce and really wanted the divorce. That was the first month where my company did $1 million in sales. And the Jewish accountants here. Dental supplies. Dental supplies. Nothing too exciting, but we worked really hard. And I'll never forget that I thought I just, summited Everest in terms of $1 million in sales. But I felt like the biggest failure. I would have traded everything to not get divorced. Even though it was a miserable marriage and all I did was spend 4 years begging Hashem that I should be out of this marriage, the minute she rejected me and reminded me once again that I wasn't good enough, all I wanted to do was hold on to her. And the kids are, long story short, it started a spiral. Until that point I was mainly from. Sure, I'd step off the tracks once in a while. But I remember the first week after I got divorced, or after I knew I was getting divorced, I remember the first day going to my parents' house on a Friday night, and I had gone from being a balabas, being a successful person. My friends looked at me, wow, you're so successful, you have a business, and I hired some of my old classmates to work for me just to make myself feel even better, I'm sitting at my parents' house, and I remember that Friday night dinner, and they started singing Ishes Chayil Mi'imtza. And I remember I just started crying. I left the house. I didn't keep that Shabbos, nor did I keep a bunch of Shabbosim after that. And that started a real spiral of dysfunction. Again, not during work hours. I worked really hard. I was really functional. I employed a lot of people. A lot of people depended on me. I gave a lot of tzedakah. Maybe not enough, but I gave, it wasn't all bad. There were enough reasons for me to tell myself that I don't have a problem, that I wasn't an addict. I was a successful businessman. I had friends. I had family. I wasn't on the street. I put on tefillin most days. I tried to be a good yid. Whatever, Shabbos was hard because I smoked. I smoked a lot. But at that point, I smoked a lot of different substances. I remember one thing that really stood out on me was and I don't say this because I'm proud. I say this because I want to share with you guys realness. I remember there was one Shabbos morning where I was driving on a Shabbos morning, and I definitely wasn't driving to shul. And I reached for my drink in my car, whatever it was, a coffee, or I remember putting my hand over my head to make a shahako. And I remember thinking to myself about like the conflict of the Yetzer Hara, of the temptation, and that Yiddish neshama that just wants to do right by the Rebbeinu Shalom. The truth, this was a real thing that happened to me, and I remember sitting there making a shahako, and I remember like trying to really understand afterwards, like, you know, why I still wanted to make a bracha, even though I wasn't even keeping Shabbos. And obviously, I mean, now it makes sense to me. To keep Shabbos, I had a Yetzer Hara not to keep Shabbos, and to make a bracha, I had no Yetzer Hara not to make a bracha. But I had a couple of years where my smoking in the evenings after work, my gambling became really, I'd work hard, I'd have a limousine pick me up from the office, pick up my friends who worked with me, we'd go to casinos, some days we'd make astronomical sums of money, most times we lost. And I was just miserable. I was just a miserable human being. But most people didn't know. Most people thought I was happy. I took on this character of this happy party bachelor. And then by now I was running a multi-million-dollar business with my brother, who's probably at home right now, watching this on Zoom with a glass of wine in his hand. Yona, I love you. And then one day my mother came to me and he said, I know this like sweet Latina woman from Colombia who has a child, whatever. Why don't you guys go out? So we went out. Long story short, I ended up deciding to get married to her. And I figured I'm not going to make any of the mistakes that I made with my first marriage. I'm just going to tell her ahead of time who I am, what I do. You know, I gamble. I smoke cannabis. I wasn't much of a drinker at all. I really didn't. I'd probably drink maybe if I was at a simcha. And I say this now just because as my story will progress, like I want you guys to understand that at this time, I'm in my 20s, I didn't drink. Kimat velo. It wasn't even, if I had alcohol in my house, it was to serve it to guests. Long story short, I married this lovely woman named Tamara who's here. She had a child who was 2 or 3 years old, and I adopted him. And I thought, that's it. We solved the wife problem. Now I have a business, I got a wife again, cars in the driveway, life's good. She's not going to bust my chops for smoking pot in the evening because she knows I do that. I made it like very clear, like, you know, they say like generals usually fight, you know, the last battles instead of the new battles. I was trying to make sure I didn't repeat the same mistakes I made with my first wife. Yeah. And I started partying a little more. I got into music. I started making music. Again, I assumed that she was just happy being with someone who wasn't abusive, or the way I considered abusive. Definitely not physically abusive. I thought I was a pretty decent husband. I provided shelter and comfort. And pretty much I left her to her own devices, and she left me to my own devices. And I assumed that she was good with that. And I have friends over, and they'd be plugging in amplifiers and electric guitars and chaos. And I never even learned how to... Okay, for some of you here, marijuana is rolled into a cigarette. For a lot... I love the way you're nodding your head. There's different ways to ingest it, but I never lived in the culture of like, in the drug culture. I was never that guy. That wasn't me. Those were the other stoners. I would get them delivered to me rolled, like pre-rolled. Like, I wasn't getting flour, I was getting challah. My sister finds me funny. Thank you. They actually, okay, there's too much ground to cover here. They actually say, like, one of the reasons why we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz as opposed to hamotzi kemach min haaretz is because that before the chet of Adam and Chava, it's not even a joke. I'm just trying to say the Torah. What do I have to do for you to take me seriously? Okay, that's fine. They say before the chet of Adam and Chava, we were supposed to get bread, like ready-made bread growing from the ground. But then the women, like Chava ruined that for us. Thank you, Chava. I brought my psychiatrist along with me today in case I run into any trouble over here. He's ready. He's there. He has his pen and paper. He's ready to write scripts by the second over here. He's like, okay, mood stabilizers, depressants, uppers, downers. He's here. He chopped down trees to have pads ready to go. Bekitzer, my drug intake progressed, became a lot worse. But I came home every day. My wife knew where I was. I went to the office in the morning. I had minyan in my office. I had shiur in my office. I wasn't a bad guy. Sorry? There were definitely side effects. I would neglect my wife. I would neglect my kids. I was gambling hundreds of thousands. Sorry? Not that I'm aware of. Should I have been hearing them? I didn't hear voices. I mean, there's a song from the Eagles that says, there were voices down the corridor, I thought I heard them say. And then, like, welcome to Bet Shemesh. Am I imagining this whole thing, Doc? This feels like very surreal to me. This is here, right? I'm pinching myself. This is here. I told myself if I ever feel like things are going to get crazy, I'm just going to start like singing Moshiach Amecha or something. Are we doing good? Are we good? We're all good? We're all good? Okay, great. Thank you. There was collateral damage. At that point, I started a beautiful thing called like Thursday Night Farbrengans, where I'd invite guys over to my house, and then I started drinking a little bit. Then it became a thing. We'll sit around Thursday night. Let's start bringing in Shabbos a little bit early. We'll make some cholent. We had a Geshmak, a Chabad guy that worked with me, who made the best cholent. And we made cholent, and we sat around, and we said Divrei Torah, and we had different Rabbanim come over, and we would farbreng, and we really would farbreng. And the whiskey flowed. Every Thursday night, we turned into Ireland, Scotland, and that brought alcohol into my life. Not in a way, I wasn't drinking on a Wednesday morning, but Thursday night I drink, usually a little too much. And then on Shabbos, then a Kiddush club. You have to be part of a Kiddush club, no? It's the first time I'm part of any club. My whole life I wanted to be part of a club, now I'm part of a Kiddush club. Once in a while we'd bring in Shabbos, pre-game. We'd pre-game. We turned Shabbos into a Super Bowl. We'd start pre-gaming before Shabbos. L'chavet Shabbos Kodesh. And I was always miserable. I was still struggling with my weight, and similar to anyone here that struggle with their weight. Anyone? No one? Oh, I feel like I'm here. It's amazing. No one here struggled with their weight. I did a little bit, but I took care of it. Amazing. I got to meet your nutritionist. Baruch Hashem. That's amazing. Okay, beautiful. Beautiful. So I'd start diets every Sunday. There was always something. You know how like the Jewish calendar doesn't luz up? Like you go from Yom Tov to Yom Tov and Tainus to Tainus, and there's always something. Then you Bahab and Pirkei. Like there's never like you don't get like for the next 90 days your schedule is clear. There's nothing to worry about. They want to make us like neurotic, and we're counting and Sfiras HaOmer, and we're this and we're that, and there's always something. And then they wonder by the time we show up by Dr. Friedman's office, I'm like, Doc, I'm losing my freaking mind. I can't keep track. There's 18 minutes. There's this. Shabbos 72 minutes. I just want to relax. I want to feel good for like 3 seconds. But there was always like, I'm going to start my diet on Sunday. I'm going to stop gambling. after New Year, before Pesach, after this, after that. There was always something coming up in the calendar. And I already had these different things that I'd alternate between, which is dieting from my weight, stopping to smoke cannabis, stopping to drink, stopping to gamble. Some days there'd be hachlatas that, okay, as of after Rosh Hashanah, I'm done with everything. Or there would be other ones say, okay, as of Sunday, I'm done. No more alcohol. Just a little cannabis. It's not. They say there's even new studies that say it's healthy. A little this. No, cannabis is bad because it can make me hear voices. A glass of wine a day. They say a glass of wine a day. Look, French people are okay. They drink wine all day. I want to be like Napoleon. And it was a concept. I was never happy and complacent. I was never sitting there. I was going to therapists. I was going to Rabbanim. I was getting brachas from Rebbes. Maybe I should have just got a Mishpacha magazine subscription. But nothing I did, some stuff worked for little tkufot. I was able to stop this thing for a period of time, that thing. Sometimes I'd stop all of them for a period of time, but it was never sustainable. Then we bought a company in Los Angeles, and I flew out to Los Angeles, and I was there for, I don't know, a week to 2 weeks. And I was there and I was busy and we were doing business stuff and I was in Los Angeles and I didn't feel the need to gamble or do drugs. So then I had absolute clarity and I realized that my problems in life were that I lived in Toronto. And if only I'd moved to Los Angeles, everything would be great. So I did what any reasonable person does. But then I had a couple of kids, uprooted my family, and we moved to Los Angeles. And of course, Los Angeles was not the solution to my problems because I brought myself to Los Angeles with me. So I was still there. And it didn't take long until things deteriorated even more. And the more things you try and fail at, the more desperate you become. Like, nothing's going to work for me. Nothing's going to help me. And I was mamish living in my own, I was living mamish in my own world. And I was working, but I'd wake up in the morning. The first thing I would do is I would check to see what sporting events were going on later that day, just to understand, where I can get my next buzz from. And I was still I wasn't a crackhead. I wasn't like those drug addicts that you see in the Tachana Merkazit. I wasn't like that at all. I was running a multi-million-dollar business. I was Shomer Shabbos. I had kids. I had guests over every Shabbos. I was a respectable person. I was miserable. I had low self-esteem. I had a huge ego. And my wife, and I'm only saying this because I asked her Rosh to say this, and then my wife had a miscarriage. And I was in my own world, and again, I grew up with we were 11 siblings, and scattered amongst the 11 siblings, there was also probably another 10 miscarriages or something. So the concept of children, miscarriages, to me was like, it was like my mother would go to the bakery every Friday and, like, you're coming home with a baby, a fetuses, like, what's... Do you find anything funny about this? That's my brother, but that's one of my brothers. That's one of the ones that survived. When there's like, it's you, Ishay, that guy. That's one of the fetuses that made it. And I say, I'm only sharing this because it's funny now, but it wasn't funny. But I'm saying this, because Modeh v'ozev Yerucham, nachon? This is my friend Shlomi. He knows all my troubles, so he's just sitting there. We'll wake him up soon. And my wife's like, I can't believe my wife's depressed. She's crying. I'm like, what's the big deal? It wasn't even a human being. Like, it wasn't. Because if someone was going to write a sefer of all the wrong things to say to a wife who just had a miscarriage, I'm William Shakespeare. Like, Shakespeare's kind of a Yiddish name now that I think about it. So my marriage started unraveling, and I'm in Los Angeles now. And then as a last-ditch effort, I thought maybe if we move to Miami, maybe Los Angeles is the problem. If we just move to Miami, there's a lot of Latinos. My wife's Latino. I don't know. Somehow that made sense at the time through the hazy cloud of... So we uprooted ourselves, and we found a place in Aventura, but the place was only going to be ready a couple of weeks later. And we went to stay in a hotel until our house was going to be ready. I remember there was a Shabbos, and that Shabbos, I should mention that along the way I flew to Mexico. I flew to Mexico on business. When I booked the ticket to Mexico, I'm putting some of you to sleep. This is beautiful. I feel like I'm your melatonin. When I flew to Mexico, I didn't realize that the date that I booked the ticket was September 11th, 2002. And I hadn't been on many planes in my life because growing up, I couldn't afford plane tickets. So I'm on this plane, me and my brother, and I bought a stack of newspapers because I wanted to be well educated. And every page of the newspaper is planes flying into buildings. And I start getting like a little nervous. And I look around the plane, and I'm on a plane full of freaking Mexicans. And I can only say that because my wife's Latino. I'm not racist. I'm really not racist. I was actually in Mexico last week, and I was joking with them. I said, guys, I'm not racist. My gardener's Mexican, my landscaper's Mexican, my dishwasher's Mexican. And I don't think they understood a word I was saying. By the way, Ari, I found your long-lost son. You should speak to your father afterwards. Ari Green. There's 2 redheads in here, I think. I feel like you guys need to start a union. Okay. It's very hard to stay focused. Doc, you're taking notes for focus medication. And then so I was already mamish stressed out because there's Mexicans, honestly, there were dark-skinned people, and everyone on the plane looked like Mohammed Atta. And I'm on this plane, and there's the images of like planes going to buildings. And just as I started, I said, Tfil Saderech, and I started to settle in, the pilot gets on the thing, and he's like, ladies and gentlemen, we're now cruising at an altitude of 30,000 feet. I'm like, like, thank you for reminding me that I'm all the way up here. And there was tons of turbulence, and me and my brother were sitting there, and we literally were holding hands. That was probably the most intimate we've been. And we said Shema together. We literally said Shema together. And why are you lying? She finds this funny. She finds it funny. And I developed this massive fear of flying from then. But I had to fly for business. So I went to some doctor in Toronto. He's like, yeah, not a problem. You have fear of flying, I'll give you this pill. And whenever you fly, just take this pill. Next time I had a flight, I had to fly to Minnesota. I had an important business meeting because I was an important person. Don't forget that. You look like you're forgetting it. Please don't forget. Thank you. And it's a very tough crowd. A very tough crowd. And I took these pills, and it made me so sick. I got hiccups for like 24 hours. Like I literally couldn't. I didn't realize what he gave me. I didn't realize till years later what he gave me. But he gave me this pill that's called benzodiazepine. And all I knew is that it made me sick, but it took away my fear of flying. And over the years, every time I'd fly, it started affecting me less and less in terms of the hiccups and the bad feelings. And at some point, I remember being on a flight, and the stewardess came by, and she offered me a glass of wine. I'm like, sure. And then I see he's already saying Shema. And not only didn't it bother me anymore, it felt great. It felt so good. Now I actually went from hating flying to enjoying every minute. You know, when they would tell me my flight's delayed by, we're going to be just cruising around for the next 20 minutes until whatever. Great. L'chaim. Bekitzer, I'm in Miami. We're waiting to move into our house. And I remember that Shabbos, and me and my wife got into a fight about something. Because I know none of you ever get into fights with your spouses, but we got into a fight. And I was already drinking, and I was just a miserable human being and a nasty human being. And I said a whole bunch of miserable. That's my sister-in-law. Her name is Shani. Don't worry. Sorry that I bored you. We'll see you soon. Bekitzer, I got drunk, really drunk. And whatever remaining chiyus there was in my marriage, I extinguished it. That Shabbos was actually the closest I ever came that I remember to killing myself. I remember I had a bottle of bourbon, or I think it was, and I took a bunch of those pills. And I didn't care if I woke up or not. I just felt so miserable. I had moved from Toronto to Los Angeles to Miami. I had tried every type of what I thought therapy and rabbis, and in my mind, I had tried everything. And my wife was going to leave me now again. This is going to be already like, and I remember taking a bunch of pills, swigging the last of the bourbon, and Bemet thinking that I'm going to pass out now and I'm probably not going to wake up. Like, this was the closest I ever came to. He's laughing. He's like, well, you're here now. I got you. The kids, we got divorced. Now I'm divorced twice already. And we moved back to Toronto. I should have got frequent flyer miles. I would have moved back to Toronto. And I started weiter going to therapy. And I remember at the time hearing through a friend of a friend that your wife said that maybe if you try Alcoholics Anonymous or one of these 12, like, you know, you've tried everything, maybe if you try something like that, then she'll maybe be open to seeing if you could rekindle. Now, we actually, like, we were divorced, like, Besdin divorced. Like, I've said Hari at Muteris L'chal Adam more than once in my life. And I manipulatively went to an AA meeting. I made sure that word got back to her that I went to an AA meeting just because I really didn't want to be divorced. We did that, we started going to therapy, and somehow I convinced her that I was a changed person. And about a year later, there's just too much to go through every little stop along the way. I feel like the Ege driver who's like, Tishmo, ani tzarich liot b'bayit b'shmona. A year later, we came to Eretz Yisrael. Actually, my sister was getting married. We were divorced, me and my wife. But my sister, who's here, she was getting married. And during one of her Sheva Brachas, which was near the Kotel, we decided we're going to go to the Kotel and we're going to get married, remarried, me and my wife. So we went to the Kotel. Evidently, you're not allowed to get married by the Kotel because the guard came in middle, like the rabbi's there, the Sephardic Moroccan rabbi, doing his thing, Savri, Maranan. And the guard's like, Stichar God, Natsura God. Everyone starts singing Odishama. You can go, it's on YouTube somewhere. And we got married. So I was Machzir as Grushasi. It's one of those mitzvahs, like, you know, like most people don't get to do that. Like that and Shiluch HaKan. And then we had more kids. Long story short, we decided to move to Eretz Yisrael, which was about 12 years ago. And my battle, I'm skipping over a lot of the goriness. Trust me, I'm keeping this very PG-13 because of Rav Myers and because of the Makom over here. There was a lot of promises that I broke to myself daily. And I'd make those promises B'emunah shlema, like I'm not doing this again after today. And then I would do it. Along the way, I went to Daf Yomi Shir at one point. And it sits down next to me in Daf Yomi, a guy named, ironically, I'm not going to say his name, but I knew that he was like the local bookie. I knew that he was like the local bookie. And I thought it was so cool that, like, you know, like growing up, like, you know, those like troublemakers, like the guys that, you know, like your parents warn you to stay away from, but there's a little tinge of danger. I'm like, kids, he was a from guy. He came to Daf Yomi, for crying out loud. And I would place wagers with him and this, and then every once in a while when I got a certain amount of money and I owed him usually hundreds of thousands of dollars, we'd close off the cheshbon and I'd make another vow that I'm never gambling again. And at various points, I would even make him sign a document saying, I will not take a bet from you. And if you place a bet, you know, it's not chal. So the next football season came. And I'd go back to him and I'd say, Rabbeinu, I need to place a bet. He said, but you made me sign a document that, you know, if you place a bet, it's not. I said, I'll sign another document that says, that cancels out the previous one. So I have a whole office of people doing paperwork, just, banning me, unbanning me. The casinos also. The casinos have this thing, I don't know if all casinos, where you can exclude yourself, where you can go to an office, you could sign something saying, I have a problem, do not let me in here anymore. And they will not let you in here anymore. They also have something where you can go back to them and say, please let me back in here, and they'll let you back in there. Then online poker started. I'm looking around. A lot of online poker players in this room. I would ban myself from those sites also. I would run through accounts, I'd close them, but there were so many sites. It was something where, you ever played that game of whack-a-mole? You look like a professional whack-a-mole player. Have you ever played that game? No, never? My life was one big game of whack-a-mole, and I'd get this down, that would pop up. And I'd stop playing online poker, I'd bet on sports. I'd stop all gambling, I'd smoke pot. I'd stop pot, I'd drink. I'd stop all that. I was just taking those benzodiazepines, which by now I had started taking. I didn't even realize they were dangerous. I just knew that I had these little pills. I didn't buy them like from drug dealers. I had a doctor in Eretz Yisrael send them to me by taxi. That's how I got my medication. I had a doctor that would put them in a taxi and send it to my house. And if I wanted marijuana, I had a guy that would come and bring me bags of marijuana. And the local booze guy, listen, don't drink. I hope none of you drink. But if you do, this is a brand called Jeunesse, which I quadrupled their national sales. Years later, after I quit drinking, the guy at the wine store said, I thought you were having these massive events. That was all for you? I'm like, Ken Itzik. But I wasn't living like that. I wasn't living like a degenerate. I was, but I had all the reasons to tell myself I wasn't and people would try to tell me I have a problem. But I ran a business, I had kids, my wife knew where I was. I was actually, I would send people to rehab. That might sound crazy to you all, but I would, in my little local circle, if someone had a problem, they'd come to me. I sent multiple people to rehab, into therapies, into rabbis and stuff like that. And this went on, and eventually, the last Mako Bepatish was a really bad gambling bender. I remember at the time there was these websites which would sort of track the online gamblers, and track to see the high stakes players, and no one really knew who was behind the screen of any. You'd have a poker name. You want to tell us your poker name or no? All right, afterwards. I remember they were writing, this guy must be a Nicaraguan drug lord or something, because I was playing. I just wanted the thrill. I just wanted the adrenaline. And trust me, gambling is like drugs. I know because I've done drugs and I've gambled. And marijuana is like all other drugs also, because I've done other drugs and I've done marijuana. And finally I was so beat, and I lost all the money in my poker account, and my brother told me, out of love and caring, he said, listen, man, you've been going like this for 20-something years. Why don't you just go away for a week? I'll rent you a house in Caesarea. I'll just rent you a house in Caesarea. I'll get you a private chef. Just go and reset your life. Because I had never taken a day off work. Again, I had been working at 20% capacity for years, but I was still working I still had that responsibility. I was still the CEO. I said, I can't. I have work. I have responsibility. Again, this is a guy that I was destroying things. Like Nebuchadnezzar didn't destroy the way I was destroying them. And he said, no, I'm telling you, I'll get you a place in Caesarea. You'll enjoy yourself. I said, listen, I'll tell you what. There's still 20 grand left in that poker account that you're playing with. Ship it to me. I'll go to rehab. He said, why rehab? Just go away somewhere for a week. I said, listen, if I'm already going to go away somewhere, I might as well try to see if there's a place that has resources or whatever. So he gave me that last little amount of money to gamble, And there's a lot of people say a lot of different things in terms of like, what your motivation has to be to get sober. What rock bottom is. To me, Shlomi's playing guitar right now. Just don't mind him. Rock bottom is basically when you decide to stop digging. Motivation, lishma, not lishma, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. I went to rehab mainly because I was tired, but also partially because I wanted that last $10,000 or $20,000 to gamble with. But I was gonna go to rehab like a rock star because that's what I thought I was. So I called someone and I asked, "Where's there a fancy rehab with all the tennis courts and stuff where I could show up where they'd appreciate an important person like me?" And I'm saying that with sarcasm, and because. And I went to rehab under like the conditions that I'm coming. They're like, "Listen, you got to pay for a month minimum." I said, "Listen, I'll pay for a month, but I might only stay for a day." And I came with my guitars and I brought copies of my CDs. If I was a writer for Mishpacha magazine, I would have brought a stack of my Mishpacha magazines. And I came to rehab, and I'll never forget walking in there and they're like, "Okay, we have to search your suitcase." I'm like, search my suitcase? I came here on my own. Like, I'm here. They're like, no, that's the policy. I'm like, so I took the last bunch of pills that I had on me that I just had, and I just took them also just because if they were going to treat me like I was a degenerate, I was going to act like a degenerate. And that made sense to me at the time. And I came to rehab, and I thought I was the world's most interesting person. But nobody cared. Mamish, nobody cared. I thought like I would be the most fat. The other real shock when I came in there, that there was a guy there, his name is Alava Shalom, his name was Ariel. And I had forgotten that we had paid for his rehab. And I walked into rehab, and this guy looked at me and he goes, "Why are you here?" And I was paying for it, or me and my brother, we were paying for his rehab. And he was shocked to see me there because I was the healthy, normal one. I'm like, no, I might have an addiction problem. As I was like swallowing the last pills that were in my wallet. And yeah, that started my journey, my real journey of tshuva, of recovery. And one day turned into two. And I'll never forget, they talk about days. I had never in my entire life counted the full Sfiras Omer with a bracha. Never in my entire life. I went into rehab April 27, 2015. Since then, and again with Murphy's Law, I'll probably miss it next year, but since then I've counted Sfirat Omer every day with a bracha. It's been 7+ years, Baruch Hashem. And I'm not saying this because Sfirat Omer is the most important thing. The meaning of one day started having significance to me. And to get from day one of sobriety, and when I say sobriety, that meant no drinking, no recreational drugs, no gambling, none of that activity that I would do that gave me maybe momentary pleasure, but at great cost to my body, surroundings, soul, and existence. And to get from one day to 2 days to a week, and I remember how proud I was when I got to a week. And on the outside, most people that I knew didn't really get it. I remember people would speak to me and they'd be like, "Okay, how many milligrams of benzodiazepine are you down to?" And I was trying to explain to people, "I'm going through a whole thing over here. This is an emotional thing. I'm doing steps and this and that." "Yeah, but like, when are you going to be off that stuff?" And to make a long story short, one day turned into 2 days to a week to a month. And every time, they have these little cute things, chips and key tags. This tzaddik over here became my sponsor. I used to go, I don't go as often as I used to, but I would religiously go to meetings. Sometimes I would just dart out of my house because I felt like at every moment I could either go right or left. In the beginning it was really hard. Withdrawal. The withdrawal from alcohol, from benzodiazepine, from gambling, from everything. The inability to escape. The inability to soothe myself with anything that will make me feel immediately good. That whole toy box, that whole bag of candies was gone. And having to deal with myself, to being present, is so hard. And I'm here 7+ years later, and it's still very hard. Now, I'm going to wrap this up very... I'm only looking at the people not clapping and wondering what I did to them. You hate me, don't you? I'll speak to you afterwards. I'm going to try my best to make you like me. I'm joking. I'm just... there's a... I'm at risk today where... It was funny, when Dr. Friedman asked me to do this, just to make sure as part of his exposure therapy, he tells me about this months ago, just so that I could worry and stress about being a total failure for the next few months. And in the back of my head, there's this like weird thing going on, like, wouldn't it be funny if I fell off the wagon before this speech? Like, and even like, yeah, that's the head of an addict. Anyone here that's not an addict, and I'm sure there's at least one or two of you here that aren't, you're raising your hand. Yes, an addict, not an addict, not an addict. You can't really understand an addict. You can't. It's a different creature. It's a different chaya. It's mamish, a different chaya. It's just saying you cannot understand. It's like trying to explain to, I don't know. I remember asking someone in rehab, like one of the guys in rehab, what recovery was like. And he said, imagine asking someone, if you've never tasted coffee, what coffee tastes like. It's just something, being an addict, it's something that part of the reason why AA works so well, or any of the 12-step programs, it's that it's people that could relate to each other. Because non-addicts just don't, like, why would you want to keep putting chocolate cake down your throat when you have heartburn and you feel sick? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you want to drink more alcohol when you're already like, it's illogical, but it's also compulsive. I remember one time my sister, God bless her, Abigail, came to me and she goes, there's this rabbi, you have to go meet him. And I believe I was toasted out of my mind in the north. It was Chol Hamoed Pesach. I said, what rabbi now? I've been to all the rabbis, Rabbi Twersky. I said, I've heard of him. I think I've heard of him. I don't know. She schlepped me. She's a persistent little one. She schlepped me. She made me leave. I actually went with this guy. Shlomi, tu רוצה קפה? אתה בסדר? We have a doctor over here, Doc. If his blood pressure goes... She took me to Rabbi Twersky. I was so used to, like, no gabais, no nothing. Rabbi Twersky, alav shalom. And he brought me into his house. And it was just him. It was just him, myself, and this tzaddik. And there was no gabaim. There was no secretaries. There was no, like... He didn't want money. He didn't want anything. And I wish I remember every single thing he told me. But sadly, at the time, I was still not in sobriety. But I remember asking my wife recently, like, what the overall theme was of what Rabbi Twersky told me. First of all, he shared stuff with me that I don't think I'd ever heard another human being be so real and vulnerable about it. I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like you're a famous rabbi and author, and I don't know, Peanuts, Charlie Schultz, I don't know, in Yanim. And I couldn't believe that he was being so vulnerable. I also couldn't believe how real he was. Just like so real, such a real, it wasn't Rebbe Shemaisis. It was real, it was logical. But the main message that he had for me, according to my wife, who, she has like elephant memory. Is that what it is? Or is she like, was that, because I was kvetching. I kvetch sometimes. I usually kvetch. And I said, like, why? It's not fair. Like, my life sucks. My life's always sucked. Like, I'm always miserable. I'm always trying. He said, you're not here to be like happy. Like, the purpose of this world is avoda, is work. The purpose of this world isn't to sit and be comfortable. Later on, I found out that he was running a Red Lobster, and he had YouTube videos and shrimps and lobsters and inyanim, and that was like a central theme of his. But at the time, like he was just telling me, like, you're here to work, and like being happy and comfortable isn't necessarily, you know, what you're entitled to or what your primary focus was. I want to just wrap this up by saying the following. I'm sure parts of my story don't resonate at all with some of you. I'm sure parts maybe do with some people. Addiction comes in so many different flavors. It can be, it's not a one size fits all. And unfortunately, a lot of us, myself included, spend years of our life denying our issues or struggles or addictions because we're not like this, or we're not the classic that, or we're not this, I haven't done this drug, I haven't done this, I don't drink at this time of day, I do sober October, I do this, I do that. It can come in many different shapes and forms, but the beautiful thing is that anybody, you know, I remember in rehab, they're like, yeah, but rehab only has like a 5% success rate. 100% the people that put in the work are successful. It's like the gym. 100% of people that are willing to do the hard work, that are willing to get through one moment at a time, are successful. So I hope that there's someone out there now who's maybe struggling with something that understands that anyone, I'm not special. I'm special, but I'm not special. For this moment, I'm sober because I'm doing what I need to be doing. If I don't do it in a moment from now, I'm not going to be, and I won't be sober. Just to wrap up with one word, it says, I forget who says it, but it says by Yosef and the brothers, V'lo yachal Yosef li'tapek. Yosef couldn't control himself. They say, V'lo yachol. When a person feels like he can't anymore, he needs to go. He needs to go and grab that drink. He needs to go do whatever that behavior is. Yosef li'tapek, do it a little more. Hold on for one more second. 1 more second, 1 more minute, 1 more hour, 1 more day. The program of AA or NA or all the different A's is living in the present, being present 1 moment at a time. Okay? I just wanted to, in closing, I was just reading this to my kids over Shabbos. It's actually from the book, The Rabbi and the Nuns. I was reading just a little story which very much spoke to me. One thing about Rav Twersky's farm is the English language that he uses is such a high language. I push it, we need a dictionary along with it. But I'm going to read this, it was NSAN. Once there was a stone cutter who earned his living hewing slabs of stone from a mountain. He often bewailed his sorry fate. I have to work from dawn to dusk, breaking my back, lifting this heavy pickaxe all day. And then I barely earn enough money to put bread on the table for my family. One day, you know this story? No spoilers, Doc. One day he heard a tumult. Climbing to the peak of the mountain, he could see from afar there was a parade in the city. The king was in a royal procession, and people had lined the streets shouting, "Bravo, long live the king," and throwing flowers at the royal coach. The stone cutter raised his eyes to heaven. "Dear Lord," he said, "you are a just God. That king and I are both human beings. Where's the justice that he should be so mighty and powerful and I should be so downtrodden? If you are indeed just, you will give me the opportunity to be mighty as the king." Suddenly he felt himself transformed. God had answered his prayers. He was the mighty king, receiving the accolades from thousands of loyal subjects. How thrilling it was to be so powerful. But then he began to feel very uncomfortable. Clad in his ermine robe, 2 points if anyone knows what ermine means, because I have no idea. I went to Cheder. Don't judge me. Fine. He could have just written fur. It would have saved me the indignity. I'm going to read it clad in his fur robe. I'm changing the girsa. I'll be like, Nusach acher fur. Clad in his fur robe, he was wilting as the sun's rays fell upon him. What? He said, the sun can humble a king? Then the sun is the most powerful. I wish to be the sun. He was transformed into the sun, and he enjoyed its unequaled power. But then he found himself frustrated. A dark cloud had passed beneath him and was not allowing his rays to penetrate. What? He said, a cloud can frustrate the sun? Then it must be more mighty than the sun. I wish to be a cloud. As a cloud, he took great pleasure in frustrating the sun. But then a sharp gust of wind blew him away. The wind must be mightier than a cloud. I wish to be the wind. As the wind, he became ferocious, causing tidal waves and leveling forests. But suddenly he was stymied. He had encountered a tall mountain, which resisted his strongest gusts. If a mountain is mightier than the wind, I wish to be a tall mountain. As a tall mountain, he dwarfed all else on earth and felt most powerful. But then he felt a sharp pain. A stonecutter wielding a pickaxe was tearing away parts of him. He said, if a stonecutter can dismantle a mountain, then he must be even mightier than the mountain. I wish to be that stonecutter. And so he became the mightiest of all, a stonecutter. הושיע את עמך וברך את נחלתך מוהם ונעשה מד העולם הושיע את עמך וברך את נחלתך מוהם ונעשה מד העולם הושיע את עמך וברך את נחלתך ונעשה מד העולם הושיע את עמך וברך את נחלתך ונעשה מד